By the time a child is 6 years old, they should be hitting mastery with all their speech sounds.
Okay.
Take a moment to think with literacy where that hits.
Welcome to the Christy-Faith Show, where we share game-changing ideas with intentional parents like you. I'm your host, Christy-Faith, experienced educational advisor and homeschool enthusiast. Together, we'll explore ways to enrich and transform both your life and the lives of your children. Well, hello, everybody. We are here again on the Christy-Faith Show. I am thrilled to have our guest today, where we are going to talk about speech therapy, homeschooling, how to navigate this world when your kid needs help. I am so excited to have Amanda Owens here. She is a speech and language pathologist, or in the lingo is SLP. And she is a proud homeschool graduate. I didn't realize that, Amanda. Quirky, in such a charming way, though. Creative speech and language pathologist, a grateful homeschool mom to your 4 children. You take solid speech therapy research and clinical insight, and you package it into accessible tools and training for homeschooling parents. Can I tell you how much we need you in our space? I'm so excited that you are here, empowering parents to do more with speech therapy at home. Amanda believes that parents are the secret sauce to speech therapy success. I cannot wait to dive in there, because that is not the message that homeschool parents are given. Right? And the best progress happens when you equip good parents with the right resources. Welcome to today's show, Amanda. The first question I want to ask you is, how did you get into homeschooling, and what got you into speech therapy?
Okay. All right. So these are fun. So I became a homeschooler in 8th grade. And simply put, it was finances. My parents could not afford putting me through private school anymore. I had been in the public school for about a semester, and they were like, man, she is getting eaten alive. But, the stories came out later. I had some interesting experiences in the private schools actually as well that didn't lead necessarily to bodily harm, but were actual physical, there were events. And I was very introverted, and my mom, she knew that she wanted me to have a very Christian upbringing. She was really concerned about my worldview. And she was noticing that my friends were a little bit, avant-garde. They were a little quirky, but they definitely were just concerned because I was hanging out with the oddballs. And that was the group that I was spending my time with. So my parents moved me into homeschooling. My mom was like, hey, you're going to be homeschooled. What do you want to do? And so I went online with my mom's credit card, and I picked out myself my curriculum for my first year. I bought it. I installed it on my computer. I did it. After that, whenever I wanted to change curriculum, I did it. I scored my own schoolwork. I made my own transcript on Microsoft Publisher. And
oh my goodness.
It's just such a hands-off. It was a hands-off experience for my parents. My dad's a career firefighter, so he was gone for large chunks of time when he was gone. My mom was a career woman, not a traditional homeschool mom. And we just made it work. We just made it work. So if you ever have questions about hands-off homeschooling your high schoolers and can they turn out okay, I think I did. I think it turned out all right.
But here, the real question is, based on your experience, would you take that technique with your kids?
Yeah, I actually probably would. I mean, I think I would want to be more involved just for my own enjoyment, like a co-investigator. In the things that they're interested in, they really want to learn. We're not unschooly, me and my family. We're, I would call, more Charlotte Mason / eclectic. But I definitely think that a certain degree of independence can actually be very preparatory for college and master's level experiences, especially masters, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that self-governance piece, I think, is vital. And, to the extent where you let your kids fail sometimes. And there's consequences to that better learn it at home.
Yes, from someone that
later.
loves you.
with someone that loves you, who can walk you through it, walk you through healthy emotional, resiliency with failure and all of that. Well, that is so interesting. I was not expecting this podcast to go in that direction. That's I feel like that's a whole nother podcast of let's interview some second geners that would give us a lot of insight. So yes, you ended up doing graduate work.
Yeah.
You are a speech and language pathologist. For the rest of this show, we can just say SLP. That's short for speech and language pathologist. What got you interested in that?
Most speech language pathologists have a really beautiful story about how they wanted to be in a helping profession and they did research about it and they come up with that. Or honestly, most of them, they had an experience with a family member who had a need for speech language pathology. Either, they had a grandparent who had a stroke and needed to relearn how to swallow. I did that for a few years. Or, they were in school and they were made fun of because of the way they spoke and they got their confidence because a speech language pathologist helped them learn their sounds. They had a sibling who learned to talk because of a speech language pathologist. But for me, it was a badly designed website that led me to speech language pathology. I did not know that it existed as a field. And my undergraduate was, brace yourself, I got a Bachelor of Science in music performance, specifically operatic voice. So vocal performance, fat lady singing, that was me. And I realized that I really wanted to just keep the door open for something that was a little bit more dependable. I could live and have a family maybe, because almost everybody I knew who went for it, they didn't have work-life balance. Even the ones who had steadier jobs, they were still, working all their weekends, rehearsing every night. They were faculty, and that's a high-pressure job. Ha, ha, ha. I totally didn't pick a high-pressure job. But I was looking for business administration for music, and the University of Akron, Ohio, not a plug, they should probably check their website. They had speech language pathology right next to music administration. Like, how bananas is that? So I'm like, what is that? I've been cruising Google looking for jobs all day long. What is that? I pressed on it. I started reading about it and I was like, oh my goodness, I would love to do that. And so I shadowed at a top 20 school that I ended up going to, Indiana University, and I just fell in love. I watched the clinic. I watched some sessions. I sat in classes and I was like, people and brains, how much better can I get? Like, I love it. Yeah. So I fell in love with it, but I'm grateful. It's a God incidence. No coincidence here.
That is so cool. So you have told me that the one question you are asked most often is, when do I know if my kid needs speech therapy? And as homeschooling parents, we don't have a school district coming to us when our kid is in kindergarten telling us this. And so I would love to hear how you answer families with that question.
Oh, man. Yeah, because I do get that question all the time. And usually when a homeschooler asks it, they come from two positions. One, which is almost this like, I dare you to tell me that there's something wrong with my kid and they're not just going to blossom when they blossom. Because that's one of the amazing strengths about us as homeschoolers. I love that my community waits for children to learn on their own time. They give them exactly what they need to grow, not what anybody else needs to go, but exactly what they need to grow. And that's a huge strength. But on the converse side, then sometimes there's also like this double-headed like mom guilt of, oh my goodness, did I wait too long? Should I have done something, etc. Because you're spending so much time working with your child's individual strengths. Like, homeschooling is the ultimate IEP, individualized education plan. And so sometimes it's hard to like come up for air and see, the trees in the forest and get a good picture. And usually my thought is follow your mama gut. If you have question marks, then you're probably right. I very seldom have a mom bring a child to me and say, I think there might be something a little different. And then I do one of my screenings and I'm like, oh, no, the kid's totally fine. Usually they're spot on. Their mama gut is precious because they spend so much time with their children. These parents, they do. But I personally use the milestones for speech sounds that came from McLeod. So it's MCLEOD. McLeod has some great milestones for speech sounds, and they're earlier than you would expect. For instance, R isn't when you're 10.
Yes.
You should be speaking fairly clearly, fairly young. And
how young? How young?
Ooh, do you want to know?
Yeah.
I got a chart.
Well, I would love to hear, because there is messaging in the homeschool space. They'll catch up. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, in literacy, that is not what the research is showing. The research is showing in literacy. Now, I know this is an episode about speech, but in literacy, early intervention is vital. So is that the same case for speech therapy? Okay.
Absolutely.
And then what? Yeah. So when you have your toddler that, is hard for other people to understand, but maybe you understand them and you're wondering.
And you have that superpower.
Because you're the parent. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So what are some of those milestones, for example? Before we continue, I want to share with you a program that has been a game changer for our family. At our learning center, we instructed and helped kids through pretty much every program on the market. So we know firsthand just how important a solid math foundation is for our kids' futures. Finding the right homeschool math curriculum that didn't compromise academic excellence, but also didn't put me and my kids through the ringer was a challenge. Until one day, I found CTC Math. You guys, the rest was history. First off, it's a mastery-based program, which means your child gets a full grasp of the material. It's also loaded with mixed reviews, ensuring your kids don't forget anything they've learned. The questions are adaptive too, which keeps students confident and progressing at their own pace. But the best part, all the teaching, grading, and testing, done for you. With CTC Math, there is no compromise on excellence. Your child gets a top-notch education, and you just made your homeschool life easier. Visit CTC Math to get your free trial today. Whether you're newer to homeschooling or you've been homeschooling over a decade, the fact is creating a streamlined, successful homeschool is hard. The pressure is high, and the weight of responsibility often leads to self-doubt, second-guessing, and feeling completely overwhelmed with the excessive amounts of opinions and curricula options out there. We love our kids, and at the same time, the stakes are high. We don't want to mess this up. So how do we build a homeschool that our kids will thank us for when they're adults, and one that you have 100% confidence in? The first step to pulling all of that off is joining Thrive Homeschool Community. Thrive Homeschool Community is where you learn the 8-step homeschool success framework to build an undeniably successful homeschool. Each year and each kid presents us with uncharted territory. But when you have a good plan, the right plan, you can rest in the security and confidence that you are doing a great job. The path is easy. Join Thrive, say a quick hello to your new friends, start the 8-step homeschool success framework, and kiss anxiety goodbye. It's risk-free, no contracts. You can cancel anytime, no questions asked. Go to Christy-Faith.com. That's CHRISTY-FAITH.com. Enter promo code podcast for $10 off your first month. See you inside.
By the time a child is 6 years old, they should be hitting mastery with all their speech sounds.
Okay.
Take a moment to think with literacy where that hits. It's really hard to learn to segment and blend, and even more important, use phonemic awareness, not phonological awareness, but phonemic awareness to manipulate sound. And if you can't say the sounds, there's 2 reasons why this is going to be extra tricky for you. For one, you're going to say it out loud and that's going to trip you up. If it's just an articulation, just a muscle thing. But for 2, oftentimes the reason why children have a delay to begin with their sounds is the same reason why a child might have a delay in their phonemic awareness and phonological awareness skills to be a reader, because they have difficulty with phonological memory. And there's no actual technical term for phonological processing. However, those same skills, that ability to discriminate, the ability to categorize sound well, the ability to write those motor programs correctly, all those things absolutely impact reading. And the younger you are, the better. There's a literal critical period where if you try to learn those sounds afterwards, you may learn them. I've worked with some children who were adopted from China. They didn't have their R's. They're in high school and their mom's like, oh, can they? And I'm like, oh yeah, we can totally work on it. Can those children say their R's now? Yeah, they're really making progress. But can they hear the difference between a funky R and a good R? No. They're compensating using other strategies. And it's the reason why when you move from country to country or you learn a new language when you're younger, you're less likely to have an accent because you're more flexible.
Yes.
Your brain is more flexible, is ready to learn those things. So yeah, seize the day, take that time, right?
Yes. Well, thank you for giving that concrete answer because, just having in mind 6 years old for anybody hearing this and is being told some messaging that we hear so much in the homeschool space. Oh, just wait, they'll blossom and really, I think with this, now that I've learned this from you just this second, and also what I already knew about literacy, that this is not something that you play with because it's indicative. What I'm hearing you say is this is indicative of several things that could be going on, not just one. It could be, could you unpack that a little bit? We will hear maybe a speech issue in a child. Say someone has, maybe this is too simple, a lisp, or maybe you can name something more common. What could be the reasons behind that that needs to be uncovered by an SLP in order to move forward?
Okay. So I'm going to start categorizing a little bit. So something like a lisp. Okay. I would call that an articulation issue. So that's how things are getting to where they need to move and whether or not they can get to where they need to be. When it's a lisp, usually my gut says that is a hold on to your seat, orofacial myofunctional disorder. That means that the way the mouth functions is not what it should be. The brain might be fine. They can plan the motor programming. They can coordinate it just fine. But their mouth doesn't have the oomph to do what it needs to do. The function is low. Usually those kids are the open mouth breathers, which, by the way, that also has connections to exacerbated ADHD symptoms and just overall lower learning than you might expect. They are more likely to snore, have airway issues, even sometimes like apnea when they're sleeping.
I've known people that realize their 10-year-old has a tongue tie. It was never discovered ahead of time. And you mentioned that mouth breathing piece just really quick. That book, I forget, I think it's by a gentleman named Nestor, Nestor. I will clarify it in the show notes. There's a book called Breathe that goes into all the research around mouth breathing and just how it really needs to be solved for adults and everybody else. But that's a whole nother thing. But it just reminded me, like, PSA, if you're a mouth breather, get that book right away. I go to one of those crunchy dentists and your first visit with her, she's like, you got to read this book. You got to do this. You got to do this. And anyway, so something like a lisp, that's more physical, something going on. What are some other pieces that go on as well?
I'll have another book for you to put in there too. The 6-foot tiger, 3-foot cage. That's another good one because it's all about your whole health. You should not snore. Snoring is not something that should be happening. So
we'll put in the show notes.
There you go.
Now I'm going to, add to Amazon cart right now.
So in case you have a snorer in your home, just look at them and go, you're not normal. Just so you know, not normal. And I can say that because I was starting to feel apnea symptoms myself at a certain point, which I've done exercises for and is improving. But then also I often will have a family bring a kiddo to me and they're like, oh yeah, they weren't talking until they're 4, but they're totally fine now. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, but I've been spending the last 30 minutes with them. And even though they're a 5th grader, I totally knew that they had a language delay. Mm-hmm. And their whole academic career could be different. Not because, every kid needs to go to Harvard. Not because every kid needs to, academic potential is not the whole of your human existence. It really isn't. There are things that are far, far more important. However, if you're already working with them anyway, wonderful moms and dads who are homeschooling, then why not give them that great foundation early on so that the whole rest of their trajectory is just changed? Like, you guys are the exact right parents for that because you already care. Like, I know it. Absolutely. And so besides just the dyslexia effect, it can change, reading comprehension. It can change their ability to retain information as quickly as others. So they might feel more of a struggle. And that could be due to a difference in phonological memory or syntactical memory or syntactical understanding. So that understanding the way pieces of language put together. And it's why it took them a longer time, even if it was only a delay of 6 months to a year. It might be why it took them a longer time to get where they went. And while they got, to normal, they still might not be at their normal. Those are my thoughts with those ones.
The show will resume in just a minute, but first I want to share with you an incredible resource that is totally free to homeschooling families everywhere. Have you ever felt like you were on trial for your homeschooling choice when visiting a doctor or another service provider? It's unsettling, especially when someone misinformed has the power to threaten your family. Unfortunately, we have heard countless stories of parents who have felt trapped in offices and met with suspicion rather than support simply because they were homeschoolers. I've been profiled and interrogated myself, and I'm sure many of you have as well. Enough is enough. It's time we proactively vet service providers before giving them our business and our money. Enter Christy-Faith's list, a directory 100% free to homeschooling families, connecting you with homeschool-friendly service providers who promise to support you in your homeschooling choice. We want every homeschooler in America to know about and be using this list. So here's how to make Christy-Faith's list a household name. 1, tell all your friends about it. Let's show the market just how powerful the homeschool movement is. 2, check Christy-Faith's list website before stepping foot into any service provider's office to make sure they are on there. And 3, if your favorite service provider isn't on the list, make sure to refer them. There's a button on the homepage of the website. It takes only 30 seconds, and that way we can send them a lovely invite. If you're listening and you are a homeschool-friendly professional, we want you on the list. We're eager to connect homeschooling families with you, shout your name from the rooftops, and bring you tons and tons of business. We have plans for every type of business, both small, local, nationwide, and worldwide. Check out ChristyFaithsList.com today. Hi, Mama. If you like my social media content and my show, I'm pretty sure you will love my book, Homeschool Rising, Shattering Myths, Finding Courage, and Opting Out of the School System. My book is for homeschool parents, both veteran and new, and the perfect book to hand any homeschool skeptics in your life so they can better understand why you've chosen this amazing lifestyle. This book will challenge you, empower you, encourage you, and give you solid, mindful answers to all those questions you get about your homeschooling choice. Grab your copy and maybe an extra one for your mother-in-law today. Homeschool Rising is available wherever books are sold. Yes. You are an advocate of parent involvement in speech therapy. You even say that parents are this secret sauce. Can you unpack that a little bit? Because I think this really sets you apart. Messaging to parents across America is, this is a specialty. Stay out. Let me do my work so that I can get your kid where they need to be. You don't know enough. What is your messaging to parents?
My messaging to parents is that they are the secret sauce. They are the key. And if I train a parent and only see their child every once in a while, I know I'm going to get better bang for both of our bucks and for the child's benefit than if I were to work with just their child. There's actually some really interesting research specifically in the area of late talkers that when they had different control groups, they had one group that was speech language pathologist doing traditional therapy saying, good job, guys. That was a great session. Here's your worksheet. And they just worked with the child. They made progress. Of course, they made progress. Great. Therapy works. Then the group that, took some time to train the parents a little bit, they made even more progress than the therapy with SLP only. But the group that made the most progress was the third group. The third group, the speech language pathologist, worked with a child to get an idea of what needed to happen. And then instead of spending time doing therapy with a child, they trained the parent what to do. And the parent executed the plan and had that SLP as their touch person. They made more progress than the other two groups. The parents are the secret sauce. specifically parents that aren't just getting homework, parents that aren't just being told, generally speaking, read to your child more, and you should talk more with your child. Say everything that they're doing, which that one is a good one, but there's so much more to it that brings it to a therapeutic level instead of just a good parenting level, which most parents that come to speech therapy, they're good parents already, but they need to know what to do that brings it to a therapeutic level. And I think sometimes, that as SLPs, we're afraid that it's going to take our job, but it's not, because we have a different area of expertise, but that parent is the expert in their child's life, and they are their best teacher for good or for not good. They are their child's most effective teacher, because your child will learn lessons from you that you don't even realize you're teaching.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking, boy, this woman has some guts saying this right now. There are going to be people that do not like hearing this. I mean, you're basically saying you don't need me as much as you think you need me, is basically what you're saying. Are you saying this?
Oh, in a way, because I've also know techniques that you don't know. And I know a whole giant toolbox of them. Like, come into my workshop. Let you borrow some tools that you need for your specific child right now. Because I think one of the things that makes parents think that they can DIY when they actually can't, because sometimes they can't. Sometimes I'd actually argue for DIY. Sometimes I would say, oh my Lanta, please, please, please do not DIY. Because I've seen the effects of DIY after like a decade that leaves us with, and the fallout from that, especially because they never stopped to find out whether or not their kid needed more. But speech therapy is not a point A to point B, open the book, follow the worksheet program. It is not. It's not something where you can go, here are the 10 steps to learning R. I tried making an R curriculum. I am still in the thick of it. It still does not make me as happy as I know I would love it to make me, because I can't package, even knowing all that I know, even working with almost 600 kids now in my career. I still can't put everything I know into a workbook that I make and structure, because everything's so individual. Which is part
right.
of it.
And it sounds intuitive as well, because when I worked with kids, that was one thing that I loved about working one-on-one with kids when I was teaching them how to write versus teaching in the classroom, was I couldn't tell you where I needed to go. You reach a level of expertise where, as you are experiencing the student, you are seeing where you need to go, the turns you need to make right then and there. It's very hard to follow a protocol. This is why in the homeschool space, we say, don't let the curriculum be your master. But yeah, it's that intuitive piece. And yes, that makes so much sense that you do need the professional that knows, this is going to sound funny, but you need the professional that knows everything to empower you with the pieces that you need to do. And then what I'm hearing is that you check in again, and you make some turns, and then you get progress that way. And I bet you sometimes you do say, no, we need a couple sessions. Do you ever do that?
Oh, yeah. And actually, I have most of my families actually still see me weekly, but they make progress overall faster than what they would expect elsewhere. And the reason why we still have to work weekly, and I always give my families options, because we should definitely talk about it later, talk about finances, but we work together weekly because they're working with their parents. So they're making progress quickly enough that they need the next step like now. But when you're implementing the different exercises and things like that, and you know exactly what you need for this week, sometimes the next week you've made a big bump. Sometimes you've made a little bump. Sometimes you need a tweak and you need more supports to get over the next hump. But that tweaking, and then I have the parents just go with it. I expect that they are going to work in between, and that way we get more progress done. But if life happens, it happens. I'm a parent too.
Yeah, exactly. If you're enjoying the show and you don't want to miss out on future episodes, hit that like and subscribe button and show us some love with your comments. Those 5-star reviews really do make a difference. Well, there's 2 questions that I want to ask you. The first, there's a lot, But the first one I want to ask you is, I know you worked in 7 different school districts. Parents are going to be going to the pediatrician. The pediatrician is going to notice a speech delay, and the pediatrician will tell a homeschool mom, you should not be homeschooling anymore. Your child needs speech therapy. You get that in the schools. Your child belongs in the school. So I want to dive down that road. What does speech therapy look like in the schools exactly? And why is it ineffective? And it's not ineffective.
Oh, it
Let's
depends.
just put it this way.
Depends.
I think this is what I want to say. I think speech therapists are put in an awful position.
They are.
Because of their caseload, their expectations, because they, of course, every child they have is on an IEP, which is a legal document. So with compassion to what speech therapists have on their plate, let's talk about why group speech therapy is not, I mean, it's like funny that we actually have to defend why group speech therapy isn't great. Like, really, in our country, we're having to defend this? But yeah, we actually are. So give that mama something to say to that pediatrician in the doctor's office.
Okay. So usually the first thing that they'll say is not just you'll get speech therapy there. They'll also tell you that the reason why they're not talking clearly is because they're not properly socialized. And the answer is
that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Okay. Before people know that I'm homeschooled in a district, they are way more open in the background of an IEP or an ISP meeting. I'm going to tell you right now. And I've worked with some of the most sweetest, most amazing, most sacrificial teachers. I've worked with some amazing ones. I have an administrator who has a small chunk of my heart because I'm like, I love that woman. And she does the best she can under the circumstances she is given. But I feel like the system is broken and it puts them in a crunch. It really does. But I've heard from even other teachers like, oh, they would talk if they were here. They're just not socialized. That's why they're not talking. No, they have an actual difference with their phonological memory. They have a phonological disorder. Their brain does not code sound correctly, or their brain does not learn language well because of these different factors. It is genetic. If it was all about environment, then we would be calling CPS, right? But we don't, because you shouldn't blame yourself for having a child with a speech or language difference, just like you wouldn't blame yourself that your child needs glasses, right? So that's a big one.
Preach it, girl.
So I get real feisty about that one because
I love it.
Some of my moms get some really hard conversations. And one of my freebies is a planner that has 4 cheeky things that I say when somebody says something about my kid with a language delay, because I had a kid with a language delay. He had a really traumatic birth. It's an interesting story that I will not share here. But, speech language pathologists have kids with language delay too. It's genetics, or it's a traumatic event, or there's so many different medicines that cause, like that's one of the side effects if you take a lot of different medications during pregnancy. How do you know? You just don't. So anyways, but one of the things that I would tell them to tell their pediatrician is that the socialization actually doesn't have anything to do with it. Didn't you know it's genetic? Oh yeah, my speech language pathologist. Feel free. Just say my speech language pathologist. Call me yours. Just claim me. Use that pronoun.
So to the thousands upon thousands.
Just say, yeah. The speech language pathologist I was talking to. Yeah, whatever.
You know, they're going to take you up on this, and they're going to be going to conferences and giving you big hugs. Oh, they are.
Every time I go to a conference, there are hugs and there are tears, and I have got to start remembering to bring tissues because I never do. Yes. And then I'm crying, and I never wear waterproof mascara, besides the point. Anyways.
I know. I tell people to name drop me all the time. Yeah. Everyone has permission to name drop me for really any reason, as long as it's...
Yes. Just clarify that I'm not practicing speech language pathology in any of the states that I'm not licensed in. But you can totally say, well, I was listening to this continuing education by a speech language pathologist, and she says it's genetic. In fact, I looked at the American Speech and Hearing Association's website, and they were talking about, totally do it. American Speech and Hearing Association has wonderful resources. And actually, if you're going to go milestones, don't look at the CDC, because they've been funky since 2020. Not going to say anything else. But even the American Speech and Hearing Association has agreed that they've been a little funky since 2020, and they would agree that children should be talking more / sounding better by a certain age. But anyway, Talk to your pediatrician about the fact that it's genetic. It runs in your family. Maybe have an uncle that has a bit of a speech delay and be like that. And then when he guilt trip you, I want you to go in there concretely, because he may disagree with you no matter what you say, because you're the parent and he's the doctor and he went to a whole lot more school than you. But
if you're listening, there was just an eye roll.
Such a big eye roll.
They'll see it on YouTube, but
Yes.
Who knew I was gonna laugh this hard and have so much fun interviewing a speech and language pathologist? But you are so fun.
Oh, good. Okay, we're usually social people, so yeah, we're type A or we're really social. One of the two. I have to admit, we're either analysts or those.
Okay,
but I want you to come in there with that knowledge that homeschooling is sometimes the absolute best place for speech and language development, if not always.
Thanks for joining us for part 1. We hope you gained some valuable insights. Be sure to catch part 2, where we're going to continue this great conversation.
You have my heart. We run to where we belong. I told you, you